I have lots of favorite topics, but this is one of them. It's called what I call zooming out. And it's kind of like, and I'm not saying this in a religious sense, but getting or an arrogant sense, but more able to get the bigger picture, the God's eye view, of what's going on. So zooming out is to get the biggest picture we can. And we've talked about how not having humility gets in the way of seeing the big picture, and our defenses and our triggering get in the way, and our cognitive biases. We've looked at all of those things so far. Why should we zoom out, right? Again, I'm going to go back to the beginning, which humility is for personal enrichment, better relationships, and building bridges. Sorry. So zooming out does all those things. I remember someone early on in my bridging work said, things may not be what they seem to be, right? Because we've all got some kind of tunnel vision. We've all got blind spots. We're built like that. So the more we can zoom out, the more we can get a clearer view of what's going on, a clearer understanding of things, and therefore, eventually, ultimately, better problem solving and getting stuff done that stays done. So I want to talk a little bit about beliefs and worldviews. In order to be able to zoom out, we need to understand belief systems, worldviews. Another thing that social scientists call it is mental models. Those are all synonyms. We all have these about how the world works. And as we've seen last time, our systems, our nervous systems really like to reduce cognitive strain. I mean, it's really an imperative. And so these things that I'm talking about, beliefs, worldviews, Yuval Harari, who's the man whose quote we started with, a month ago, he calls them shared fictions. Now, we are meaning-making mammals, and we create structures that help us move through life where so much is unknowable. We need to believe in a structure, a guiding principle, to provide some kind of solid sense of reality and to be able to navigate. And so religions provide this, spirituality, philosophies, political ideologies, cults, all these things provide a map of the world, so it feels easier to live through. So how we view reality is based on our beliefs. And that's why it's so important to be able to question our beliefs, especially if we want to zoom out. There's a quote by a philosopher named Robert Anton Wilson, and he says, quote, "People think society is based on logic and reason. It's based on BS." And then in parentheses, he goes, belief systems. So belief is what is thought or felt to be true. It's what you think or feel is true, not necessarily what is true. So I don't know if you remember from last time we talked about emotional reasoning. I feel like it's true, so it must be true. Sometimes that's true, like we talked about last time, but sometimes it's not. And I've said this before, I think, but I do want to say that I'm ginger about using the word true or real or reality. I like to say what's going on. So zooming out helps us see what's going on. So your belief system orients you to the world. And on top of that, if you share that belief system with others, you orient with a group of others. So that feels really good to our nervous systems. Remember how we talked about the importance last time of in-group belonging, and it's part of being wired for survival. Belonging equals surviving. And as Jonathan Haidt says, this kind of tribal belonging, it binds us together, but it blinds us to what's outside, right? This is all how we're wired, right? This is nothing morally bad, or it's just something that those of us who decide we want to try to zoom out have to contend with. Our belief systems can never manage to tie up things in neat little packages. There's always going to be these things that don't quite fit. But our worldviews and beliefs keep us homeostatic. Remember, we've talked about that a lot, this sense of being okay, calm, well-being. And so to keep our nervous systems regulated, sometimes we have to throw out contradictory information to keep the beliefs intact and therefore our homeostasis. So remember when we talked about confirmation bias and disconfirmation bias, it helps. Confirmation bias, we only hold on to those ideas, those facts that support what we already believe, and we throw out things that don't fit into our narratives. Otherwise, it makes us anxious and not homeostatic. There's a Jungian analyst that I like very much named James Hollis. He's written a series of maybe 10 books that are very short and very, very beautiful about the human condition. But I remember one of his books, he said, and this quote gave me real pause for thought. I think it's true, but maybe not. He said, most of our lives are spent in anxiety management. Think about it. And so sometimes the anxiety is created by stuff we're making up in our mind or things we can't do anything about. If we had more time, I'd go a little bit into Stoicism right now, but maybe put an asterisk by it for yourselves, developing a Stoic, not Stoic in the sense of overriding or undervaluing things, but the old-fashioned Greek philosophy of really putting things in their place so that we can lead a calmer life. So, as I said, part of us being able to zoom out is questioning or evaluating or assessing our beliefs and our worldviews and putting them into a larger perspective. Any belief system, I don't care which one, can become rigid and cult-like. It can turn into ideology. And one thing you understand when you're in an ideological group or a cult, it tolerates no questioning, deviation, or dissent. The ideas in cults and hyper ideology, you're not allowed to question. And that's a sign that, maybe you're not in the place you should be or want to be. So in terms of politics, also going along with the political beliefs of our side is another kind of shortcut. Remember, we talked about shortcuts last time. And I speak for myself, what I used to do is I let my side do all my thinking for me. I never researched anything, kind of like those lawn signs. I'd just go with whatever I was hearing over and over again and happily. I didn't have to think, I didn't have to do the hard work of doing research. And so that eases a lot of cognitive stress, but it also promotes a sense of belonging. So you've kind of got a double bonus there. But what it also serves to do is to form a closed system. So we haven't talked about closed systems yet, but it is what it sounds like. A closed system is an intact entity where nothing new gets in. And that's what, for the most part, our group belonging, and that could be clan, like in a family. I'm not just talking about politics. These things that let no information go in because it provides this homeostasis, but it's not based on the larger what is, right? It's a bubble. My co-teacher, Joe Burgo, who some of you know, he wrote, I like what he wrote about this. He says, we'll cling to the comfort of homeostasis and marshal all our psychologically defense mechanisms to ward off threats to it, right? Remember, we saw that many times we react to opposing ideas as if they're physical threats, survival threats. Then he goes on, our inbuilt cognitive biases will interpret or discard unsettling new information in ways that preserve our cognitive status quo and sense of self, right? So the disconfirmation bias. And rebuttal mode will protect us from ideas that might threaten our equilibrium if we let them. And I think I talked about it last time. This rebuttal mode is when you're listening to another idea, you're just busy thinking yes, but, or waiting for your time to contradict what you've been told instead of listening to understand. There was a movie I saw years ago, which I love this movie. It was called Dean Spanley. Oh my gosh, so charming. But there was a line from that movie, and it is this: only the closed mind is certain. Only the closed mind is certain. And by working with some of these things that we've been talking about, this being able to hold things lightly and being poised to pivot, and these living with working hypotheses, like this is the conclusion I've come to with what I know so far. It's this beautiful place of like, yeah, I know some things. I think I have an idea of what it means, and yet maybe there's something I don't know. Somebody's already said this. What could I be missing? What am I ignorant of? There's got to be something, because I can't know everything. I want you to do a little exercise right now. Let's see, I want to move this a little bit. It's about framing. So, and framing is what media will do a lot, both on the right and the left. They will only give you a certain amount of information, which may be true, but they're not giving the bigger picture. And the true at work or work politics or family politics, it's all the same. So what I want you to do is make a little square with your fingers like this, and just look at something in your room, just whatever, it doesn't matter. Like I'm seeing a teapot right now, right? Then move 90 degrees. And I'm seeing something completely different. I'm seeing outside on my deck, I'm seeing some trees. But I'm not getting the whole picture, right? I don't have the context. I don't have the larger context. And this is what not only the media and our politicians do to us, advertising, all the things we've talked about, but what we do when we're not able to zoom out. We're really good at zooming in. And just putting that a little, I guess, bee in your bonnet in the future, like, I'm seeing this, or this is what I'm reading, or this is, my filter, this is my worldview, my belief system, my mental model of how things work. What's outside of that frame? And again, it's like, I don't want anyone, I'm not trying to change anyone's mind. I guess if I had to say what I would like is that we all, and I speak to myself too, have a more informed opinion about whatever it is I'm looking at. Okay, so now along those lines, we've got a little clip. It's just a couple minute maybe. I don't want to say anything about it. Yeah, just notice what you're perceiving. Okay, Barbara. Okay, so I would love to hear what y'all thought, but I'll take the first 3 hands to tell me what you saw, please. Anybody? Nobody?
Romaine.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Romaine, what did you see? Oh, you're muted, I think. Yeah.
I saw that the blue one was trying to talk or introduce or maybe do something with the red one. And when he approached him, he backed up a bit, and then it looked like he was attacking him and attacking him and attacking him. And then what I think I saw was the blue and the red circle or ball, whatever it is, united, and then kind of locked the big red one in the box. And then he got out and started chasing them. And then they left, and he was so upset. This is all my imagination. And he started breaking out the other sides of the rectangle. That's what I saw.
Great. Okay. Duly noted. Patty, what did you see?
Well, I saw the blue guy, you know, in the middle. He was in his belief system, and when he got kind of out, and he was trying to get other people to come into the box, into his belief system, and when they didn't, he was trying to force them in. When he couldn't convince them, then he was trying to force them in, and then they had to run away because it became overbearing. And then he went. This is, you know, great story. And then he at the end, when he went back into his box, he was all alone. What he did was then he had to widen his box to allow more in, because he didn't want to be by himself in the box. That's what I got.
Patty, you should become a screenwriter, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll take Elizabeth, and then I'm going to read Jean's comment.
What I saw was people taking different approaches, different points of view, and having an all-out battle that took many different positions in many different ways and wound up in destroying everything. Nobody got anything except a broken structure.
Whoa, okay, I haven't heard that one before. Let me read what Jean has put. The red guy is left alone after beating up the smaller guys. And also Barbara Nelson said, I saw aggression. Now, all of you have understood, I think, that this is your imagination, this is your projection. And, you know, another way of looking at it is those 3 little symbols were playing with each other. It was a game. And as we all know, they were just 3 little symbols and some lines. So this is really to show us that we all have filters, right? And we will take those filters. Again, part of this is this shortcutting thing. This, like, we want to make meaning and we want to do it quickly, neurobiologically, right? So we'll put whatever narratives we've made up around the world. These form our narratives, and they are the way that we'll interpret current events, office politics, family politics. You know, we have these tendencies, and maybe this is the other thing, we've been accurate. Sometimes these things are accurate, right? But when we assume that they're always accurate, they can become very maladaptive and get us into trouble. So we have to really be aware of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and about others, about our narratives. We need to be careful. A personal example is, for those of you who do the Enneagram, I am a recovering 2. For other people, you won't understand what this means, but nevertheless, I used to have such a lens of rejection. I could be in a room full of people who are paying me attention, and then the one person who seems to reject me, this is what my story is like, I am rejectable, right? And it really took me lots of years of therapy and catching myself, like, to understand that that's not true. That's a longer story, but maybe you all have something you can relate to along those lines. So one of the things that we need to do to be able to zoom out is to do what they call complicating the narrative. And I think I sent you an article by Amanda Ripley. So there are journalists that are trying to do this, but it's slogging, right? Because it's not very marketable. But I believe we need to get beyond perceiving life through the lenses of our closed systems. And this way we can get a more accurate view of what's going on, reality, and many things can be true at once, right? There's a lot of things that seem paradoxical and mutually exclusive, but it's not so. Lots of things can be true at the same time. So we talked about splitting last time, right? That I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad, my team's good, your team's evil. The antidote to splitting is to nudge ourselves towards nuance. I, as a person, could be called good sometimes and bad sometimes. I remember in a retreat, there was an exercise about something, there was a repeating question like, who am I, something like that, very Zen. And I remember saying, I'm kind. And then the question would be asking me again, and I would say, oh, I'm cruel. And everything I could say about myself, I could say the opposite. It was fabulous because I realized I can be, the old philosopher Goethe said, there is no crime for which I deem myself incapable. And I think embracing that in myself, I stopped so much pigeonholing people into one way or another. So once we stretch ourselves out of our closed systems and stop splitting, we can start to view the world through multiple valid narratives. So it's a huge deal. It's really not easy, but it's possible. We could cultivate complexity. We can do something they call complexifying. An obstacle to zooming out is when we simplify problems. And remember, we're wired to simplify, right? We're wired to shortcut, and we need to manually override. A lot of times it doesn't matter. I'm going to shortcut because I'm going to buy the same toothpaste every time. I'm not going to review the 20 options on the shelves, right? I think that he said that in the clip we sent for homework. But the things that really matter are causing tension. You know, if we can back up a little bit. What I do too, sometimes I realize I can name, oh, I'm having cognitive stress, but I really want to stay with this thing. What do I need to do? I need to take a breather. Sometimes it's about there's too much stimulus. I turn off the music or I move outside. You know, when you start tracking, there's a lot of things that can be overstimulating, and we could do something about it. So my question is, how do we get to it's complicated? So Barbara, can you slow our slide, please? Oh, that was hard to say. Thank you. Okay, so look at this. This, I believe, is from that Adam Grant book, Think Again. He has a lot of great graphics in there. So we start at to I know everything. There's more to this than I thought. I'm never going to understand this. It's starting to make sense. And trust me, it's complicated. And when I read this in this book, I just started laughing because it's so much how it felt to me, because as I've told you, I threw myself in the deep end 5 years ago, and that's been the journey. And I'm really, you know, this idea of being comfortable with it's complicated is a whole journey. But like my nervous system now doesn't get dysregulated when I realize, oh, this is way beyond my ability to comprehend it. You know, I can understand these different elements to an issue or to interpersonal dynamics. And there's something very liberating about this place. And it doesn't mean I don't care about things. Okay, thanks, Barbara, you can take that down. So the other thing is, someone said this to me years ago too, I love this. Anytime we're only seeing two options, we can be fairly sure that we're not seeing the whole picture. And this is about anything, like decisions about anything, right? Personal decisions or, political policy. We need to resist this automatic impulse to simplify. So some of the ways to complexify is search for information that we're lacking, but also we have to be open to being able to evaluate that. So if it's like the other side has information I don't know, but I'm going la, 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 they're evil, they're wrong, they're bad, we're not going to be able to take it in, right? So that's not very productive. I said this before, what might I be missing here? What might I be ignorant of? I sent you the list already of people I like. And I don't know if I said this before, but people will often say to me, well, I listen to MSNBC and I listen to Fox News, but for me, they're both the outrage machines on either side. I think it's better to read more nuanced people, which is more challenging. It requires a little more work, but I don't even listen to those cable channels anymore. Be aware that we have perception gaps. This is really important. I can't remember, I think I've talked about the perception gap study where they've shown that each side, a large percentage of each side believes the other side is much more extreme in their views. And it's just not true. So we're generalizing very often, making inaccurate perceptions. So generalizing is another shortcut. It's very useful sometimes and it's very harmful other times. So it's important to be able to start discerning when we should not generalize so much. One little trick that has really worked well for me is instead of saying all men are X or men are X, I started changing my languaging to some men are X, some women are X. Words like always, never, these qualifying words aren't true. In fact, sorry, that's not what I meant. When we don't use the qualifying words, these generalizations aren't true. They're never true 100%, right? But what it did for me is it changed my habit of mind. So just by being aware of my languaging, I stopped generalizing so much. But what it also does is to my listener, I think, this is not proven, but my impression is it helps de-escalate things and it models for them, but it also, if they're one of those groups, it softens the whole thing. It's a very good and simple thing to change. And we have to realize that these narratives, just like the little clip we saw with the triangles, our narratives about our perceived opponents might not be accurate. So how to keep this freshness of mind to really take in more dispassionately, more objectively, what we're really seeing, what's really on hand. And whatever we do, what I found early on is there's ways to de-escalate things, starting with me. And these are some of the ways. There's a woman journalist named Catherine Brodsky. Oh, sorry, there's a slide too, on the one-hand slide, Barbara, thanks. So here's another trick. And we'll see this in the kind of complexifying journalism I've been talking about. On one hand, on the other hand, right? it's a really good habit of mind to start forming. It gets us out of the splitting and the polarization and these binary points of view about anything. You can just practice, like, to look at, oh yeah, on the one hand, there's X, but looked at from another perspective, there's Y. And these are really, like, I can feel the excitement in myself in being in these places that are a lot less rigid. Okay, thanks, Barbara. That's good. So this journalist, Catherine Brodsky, she says, can we coax ourselves to have our narrative be, it's complicated? Can we cultivate this habit of mind? Can we normalize waiting for all the facts, or at least more of the facts, to come in before we decide what the story is? There's a lot of examples in media where they've rushed to a conclusion. I don't want to get into the examples right now, but later on, they've realized they were like hot off the press. They were going by what they heard on Twitter. But the problem when the media does that, even if they retract, it's too late. People have stuck with the sensational story. So when we're sharing, watch out. Be really sure of what you're putting on there. Are all the facts in? Are you going with a sensational, very delicious, my side is right narrative? There's a woman named Monica Guzman who's a big part of Braver Angels that some of you know about. And she's written a book that called I Never Thought About It That Way, very bridging. And that's another thing that I have said so many times. Once I relaxed, it's like, oh, no matter what side it came from, oh, I've never thought about it that way. It's actually pretty exciting. So I want to talk, oh man, I'm so over time. Okay, I'm going to do this best I can. There's three things more I really want you to understand. And this is something that I learned really recently, a couple years ago, when I was doing this training at the Kettering Institute. They taught us about wicked problems. And maybe some of you know, they're not evil problems. Wicked problems are issues and problems that are so intertwined with other elements, they're not easy fixes. So they're thorny, complex, and some of the aspects are these. They're never completely solved. There's no ultimate solution, but we can work towards amelioration, because every time we change something in these problems, it creates other changes. So we can't even completely see what's going to happen. Trial and error do not work well for wicked problems. They work for tame problems, which are easily solvable problems. For example, and I don't really want to, I'm not going down the rabbit hole of this issue, but it's a good example of where we are at the crossroads with energy solutions. Some of you are following. If, for instance, we went to all solar and all wind, just say, and we invested time, money, energy, lost opportunities. And in 5 years we go, uh-oh, it really didn't do the trick. It's too late. You can't go back 5 years and then say, oh, we should have done more nuclear, or we should have done this or that, right? And I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just showing really why we need as many viewpoints at the table, not people throwing out points of view because they're ideologically incorrect, but to say, can we work together to find the best solution? Simplified solutions for these wicked problems often create more problems than they solve. So you might solve it here, and then it pops up over here. It's like whack-a-mole, that game. And the cause and effect relationships are super complex. Cause and effect are not straightforwardly seen. So you need as much diversity of thought to head these unintended consequences off at the past. And it's really important in my own self. It's a good reminder not to jump to conclusions like the Chinese farmer. unintended consequences, I sent you that homework clip just to give an idea. But this is another thing that we can never completely head unintended consequences at the path. But if we have the most people at the table with different perspectives saying, what about this? What about this? It's like good science tries to prove the thing wrong. It tries to, so we can see where the holes are, so we can develop the best thinking. So a little example about this is I have a friend whose daughter worked for an NGO in one of the African countries, and they were putting a water filtration system in, and you think, how could that not be the right thing to do? Like, duh. And yet they found out that the women who were the water carriers from the river to the village were protected from rape. So you have to be able to zoom out and not just think ideologically or, you know, this ought to be a good idea. You need to know the context. You need to see the possible problems. We need to get to, again, zoom out to get the biggest context, the biggest picture possible without, well, all the things we've been talking about, without these filters, right? To see clearly with an uncluttered mind and an uncluttered heart. So viewpoint diversity. This is one of the things we need to bring on board. And I'm going to show you so diversity is a really popular word right now, but not so much viewpoint diversity. In very many situations where I've asked the audience, have you heard of this phrase before? Many times they say no. Maybe that's changing, but that's what it's been in the last 5 years. So we're going to show a clip. It's Jonathan Haidt, who we've talked about before, has started a organization in universities about 5 years ago. This applies to universities, but it really applies to everything we've been talking about. Thanks, Barbara.
Long told us it is humanity's highest and noble. What is reason? Philosophers have long told us it is humanity's highest and noblest attribute. It's what separates us from other animals. It's what allows us to separate truth from falsehood. There's just one problem. When psychologists study real people trying to reason, what they find is that reason has a gigantic, crippling flaw. It's called the confirmation bias. People don't use their reasoning abilities to find the truth. They use reason to confirm the views that they already hold. Now put people into teams where everyone holds the same beliefs, and the confirmation bias grows into a collective mania. Everyone helps everyone else find reasons why their side is right, further deepening shared bonds. Heaven help any individual who thinks for herself or who looks for evidence on the other side. Such people are called traitors, and groups have many ways of shutting them up. When everyone's beliefs line up, and when dissenters are punished, that's the definition of orthodoxy. Orthodoxy can be great if you're heading into battle and you want everyone marching in lockstep. But what if your goal is truth rather than victory? What if you actually wanted to help students overcome their confirmation bias and learn about the perspectives of others? What if you wanted to create a community of researchers who could actually study and solve social problems? In other words, what if you wanted to create a university? Would you want orthodoxy? Or would you want its opposite, heterodoxy, where multiple views are not just permitted but encouraged? In a heterodox university, each person can still use their reasoning powers to find reasons why they are right and others are wrong. But here's the brilliant thing. Each person becomes the solution to someone else's confirmation bias. This is why universities must have viewpoint diversity. Viewpoint diversity is the only reliable way to get around confirmation bias. Viewpoint diversity is the secret to a great education. It may not always be comfortable, but when ideas collide, we learn, we grow together. Everyone gets smarter. The alternative? Campuses that try to protect students from unapproved ideas, books, and speakers. A politically orthodox university discourages dissent, creativity, empathy, and truthfulness. That's why more than 1,000 academics from across the political spectrum have joined Heterodox Academy. Working with students, professors, and administrators, Heterodox Academy is rebuilding the culture of free inquiry and open, civil debate that turns universities into engines of discovery, growth, and progress. Support free inquiry. Share your voice. Stand up for viewpoint diversity. Visit heterodoxacademy.org.
Okay. So, I want to take a minute here just to wrap up, because this is our last class, to give you the umbrella. Okay, so we started with humility and what gets in its way. Then we talked about our human operating systems, our triggers, our defense mechanisms, our wiring, survivor wiring, our cognitive errors and biases, the 188 ones we looked at. And understanding all of that helps us to be able to zoom up, as well as understanding our worldviews, beliefs, our narratives, importance of understanding wicked problems and unintended consequences, and the need for viewpoint diversity. So, and if we don't become more humble and stop letting our operating systems run the show, we won't be able to zoom out. We'll be too defended against that. Okay, woof. So what I'm going to do, let's see, it's 3. We're gonna build in a break into the time you have for your inquiries. We're gonna, actually, this is gonna work out just fine. So you're gonna have till 3:30 to do 10 minutes each for your inquiry and have a 10-minute-ish break, okay? So I wanna describe the process again. It's the first person talks 10 minutes, the second person only listens, then the second person talks for 10 minutes, the first person only listens. It's not a conversation, and you guys will need to time yourselves because we haven't figured out a way to do it through Barbara. If you have a problem, right, they should contact you, Barbara, in the chat.
Yes.
Okay, and that should be working. And I'll read the questions out loud. Now, I want to remind us that, you know, for you, something else might be coming up aside from these questions. The questions are just to help, like, springboard you. But if there's something like in today's talk that just has sent you down a big personal inquiry, you stick with that. But these are the things I came up in a general way. What's coming up for you about any of the material we've covered in these 3 classes? You know, what's remaining is really salient to you. And another question you might ask yourself is, do you notice anything different about yourself since the beginning? What are your takeaways, if any? Is there anything that we've talked about that you feel like pushing back on? Is there anything you're feeling curious about now to pursue, you know, as you go on in your life without this class? And so are there any questions before we go into our rooms?
Yes, would you repeat that your first inquiry question, please?
Yeah, and Barbara, are you going to be able to put the questions in the chat?
I'll try.
Okay, I know sometimes it works and sometimes not. So the first question was, what's coming up for you about any of this material from the first, second, or third class? Do you notice anything different about yourself since the beginning? What are your takeaways, if any? And is there anything you feel like pushing back on, any of this material that you're not having it? And is there anything you're left feeling curious about? Or anything else that comes up for you? The American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank, he's a Roman Catholic. He wrote a book, which I meant to get the name before I started this class and I forgot, but he's written a very good bridging. Oh, it's Love Your Enemies or something. It's Love Thy Enemies, a very good bridging book, one of the first ones. So I will let him now speak for himself.
We don't have an anger problem in American politics. We have a contempt problem in American politics. Contempt is defined by social psychologists as the utter conviction of the worthlessness of another human being. If you listen to people talk to each other in political life today, they talk to each other with pure contempt. When somebody around you treats you with contempt, you never quite forget it. So if we want to solve the problem in polarization today, we have to solve the contempt problem. I sometimes write with the Dalai Lama. I was thinking about this contempt problem. I said, Your Holiness, what do I do when I feel contempt? And he said, practice warm-heartedness. And I started thinking about it, and it's true. When I do that, when we do that, when we have leaders who can do that, it's utterly world-changing. Catch yourself. You can show true strength if next time you hear contempt, you answer with warm-heartedness. Every single one of us is going to have an opportunity on social media or in person to answer somebody's contempt. Are you going to do it the right thing and make the world a little bit better and show your strength and make your enemies your friends? Or are you going to make the problem worse? That's a question that each of us gets to answer probably in the next 24 hours.
Okay. So, yeah, I thought that was a good, and it's not just politics, right? It's in any relationship that we have. Contempt is too easy a place to go to, I think. And a lot of it is defensive, in my view. I will say to anybody who's leaving, thank you so much. You've been a big part of this, obviously, but also for each other and for me. And I really appreciate that you stuck with it. It's not that easy.